Hello, it's Sunday night. Anyone out there looking for hobos? Check in if you're ready. Tonight, 12 for Voodoo Days at La Casa Fabulosa. This is David. I'm in the Magic Library. There's Wendy. Hi. Catherine. Hi. Charles. Hello. Hey, Nancy. Hope y'all had a good day today. It's a Sunday night. We made it through another week. Tomorrow's Monday. Let's see how it goes. Jamie, Jeffrey, good to see you. So if you're checking in, say hi. Tell people where you're from. If you're from out of country especially, let us know. Hey, Hobo Lisa, Patricia, good to see you. And let us know what you're drinking. So I'm back to bourbon tonight. Hey, Glenda and Debbie. I was Benchmark. I'm Evan Williams tonight. Okay. Hey, Patricia and Lisa. Good to see you. Cheers, everyone. Hey, Kim. So we're going to continue where we left off last night with Voodoo Days at La Casa Fabulosa. I'm doing an oil treatment on my hair. That's why it looks kind of like this. I got black castor oil and rosemary oil. And hey, if I don't have to go out anywhere, I might as well do something for my hair. So I kind of smell like a chicken getting ready to roast, but okay. Laura Vance, Calhoun, good to see you. Hey, Beth. So last night during the intermission, I showed you some of the artifacts of the Thursday night / Monday night / Tuesday night dinner club. Yeah, Patricia, by the way, she's from Lyon, France, tuning in, so it's a little later over there. But so I showed you some of our artifacts from our weekly get-togethers and our weekly or our yearly convocation at Slade where we inducted new members. So there's a couple more things I said I would show you tonight. So let's get the magic and ancient picnic basket. And I think I showed you last night, I showed you like the hat of induction and the candle of the Holy Gardeniae, right? And I mentioned that Matt Sweeney soiled the vestments of inauguration, so they're at the dry cleaner, but we had the chalice, the magic chalice. Look at all those ancient jewels. It's like something Charlemagne would have had. And I showed you the old Sanskrit documents Kelly Atkins and I found, and I translated them into English after taking a Berlitz language class. And a couple other things I forgot. I showed you the sacred matches. I don't know, did I show you this other one, the minor Ark of the Covenant? I don't remember what this one is. Did I show you this one? I forgot what this one is. I don't think I opened this one last night, right? Hey, Marcia. We've got a jewel at the top. Ancient jewel. Oh, this is the divine and extremely rare rites of celebration for the adulation, inebriation, and exaltation of the much coveted Executive Council. So this is to celebrate the 5 founding members. So you know who you are if you're one of the founding members. But Our Lady of Perpetual Inebriation always provides over those festivities. So that was one. And then I think this ancient relic we found on an archaeological dig. Look at all the jewels on that. The pageant of the ancient rite of the Holy Gardeniae for the official induction of new members. So if you ever get to become a member, these are the governing documents of the ceremony. And I think you saw some of the other things. Oh, and then I pointed out the ancient receptacle for the holy oil, which some people have called a gravy boat. And other people have reminded me that since it's Beth's birthday, so if you see Elizabeth Schott Ross, She's one of the original gang, and it's her birthday today, so everyone tell Beth happy birthday, and we have the tradition of drinking toasts out of gravy boats. So thanks to Matt Sweeney, I got my Jägermeister. So everyone grab your gravy boat and do a little Jägermeister, and everyone say cheers to Beth for her birthday today. So cheers. So thanks to Matt Sweeney for this nice little fifth of Jägermeister, one of my favorite all-time digestives, if you want to call it that. Some call it a fifth, I call it a single serving. Look how tiny that is. But anyway, so we're going to continue reading tonight, so I can take off my gloves. Yeah, everyone tell Beth happy birthday. And we'll continue with Voodoo Days at La Casa Fabulosa. So if you remember last night, Kelly Atkins and I were at the tavern in old Louisville, and we came across a supposed real-life voodoo lady. I've been on the trail of a supposed voodoo lady by the name of Josephine, but I've never really been able to ascertain anything. But Kelly told me about this woman from the islands who really did voodoo, and we found out last night that she does something called Obeah, which is like the Jamaican version of voodoo. And we think she was at the tavern trying to get a cat to sacrifice for one of her ceremonies. And I don't like people sacrificing cats, so I had a little confrontation with her, but she said she wasn't really looking for that, but we don't know if we believe her or not. But it turns out that night, which was Halloween, they were getting ready to do a voodoo ceremony at Eastern Cemetery, which is the subject of a lot of scandal in Louisville. In 1989, there was a huge trial. Read about it. There's a documentary that just came out. It's called Facing East. My friend Sean Stafford, who has helped me a lot with the redesign of our website, Louisville Historic Tours, and with a lot of things. He's part of the Friends of Eastern Cemetery, and when we read the epilogue to this, I'll kind of talk about what happened to Eastern Cemetery. But they have volunteers today. It was one of their volunteer days. People go there and they clean the place up. And nonetheless, it's a place where for decades they were over-interring the plots. They were burying 5 or 6 bodies in the same plot. In some areas, they said they were bringing in backhoes, and they were cutting in trenches perpendicular to the bodies there, so they were cutting through bones and caskets. At one time, they said you could see bones poking up through the earth, and staves and old pieces of wood from the caskets. So it's a really kind of scary place. And the funny thing is, it's right next to, hey, Marcy and Ashley, it's right next to Cave Hill Cemetery, which is the city's preeminent cemetery. It's one of the most beautiful cemeteries in the country. It's like a park on the inside. There's ponds, there's beautiful buildings, there's beautiful funerary art, hilltops topped with family mausoleums and obelisks. If you haven't been to Cave Hill Cemetery in Louisville, Kentucky, you have to go. And if you go, you'll visit its perhaps most famous resident, someone who made Kentucky Fried Chicken famous. His name's Colonel Harlan Sanders. He's buried there. And so many people go to see him at his grave that they eventually just painted a yellow line on the road to help people get there because so many people were getting lost. And since Muhammad Ali died a couple years ago, another famous Louisville resident, he's been getting a little competition. So they say right now Colonel Sanders and Muhammad Ali are kind of neck and neck for being the most famous, the most popular visited grave at Cave Hill Cemetery. So if you get a chance, check it out. And then right next door is Eastern Cemetery. And the thing is, Cave Hill Cemetery, they lock up the gates. Yep, Justin, they still have peacocks at Cave Hill, last I saw. And so they lock up the gates every night at 6 o'clock. But Eastern Cemetery is kind of open all hours of the day. So not surprising, over the years it became kind of a gathering spot for unsavory characters. Drug deals would go down there, prostitutes would meet their clients there, all kinds of things happened at Cave Hill Cemetery, or Eastern Cemetery, I should say. So when I found out that's where the voodoo people, the transvestite voodoo people, were going to do their rituals, I was kind of a little taken aback because I heard stories about that place at night. So Kelly, he had other plans. So he kind of abandoned me, and so I thought, okay, well, I'll go and meet them myself and see what happens. And one of the last things that Miss Maybelline, who was the big, tall, black transvestite at the bar, told me that I should wear something pretty. So I didn't know what that meant. So I thought I had to dress up for a voodoo ceremony. So we're picking up where we left off yesterday. And if you remember, there was a little guy riding a miniature motorcycle in front of the tavern. And as we left, this was the last little bit. We exited our booth and found ourselves outside in the bright sunshine. The putt-putt noise crescendoed from the distance, and soon the weird guy on the goofy miniature motorcycle veered into sight and shook his finger at me as he squealed his tires and spun around back to the street. "I got a picture of this place in the 1937 flood," he said, and his voice croaked as he tried to raise it above the buzz of the motor. From the looks of it, he was probably around for the flood of 1937, I thought to myself. I was about to turn around and tell him I found his revelation very interesting when something suddenly crashed into me and I was sent flying. I landed in a heap on the sidewalk several feet away. So that's where we left off last night. And if you're just tuning in, it seems to be a theme of mine during this time in Old Louisville that things are always knocking me over. I'm always ending up face down on the sidewalk. A goat knocked me over one night. I almost got hit by a car one night. And so here I got knocked over again, but no one really knows what this is, okay? So we start our new chapter, Halloween, and we're going to find out what it was. So, Halloween. I parked the car on one of the side streets off Bardstown Road and softly closed the door, approaching the gate of Eastern Cemetery. I crossed the street while I rubbed the bump on the back of my head. A friend of the old man on the motorcycle who had lost control and bowled me over in front of the tavern offered to drive me to the doctor's, but I had politely refused. Getting knocked down on the sidewalk in Old Louisville was turning out to be a pastime of mine, so I had brushed myself off and gone home. After handing out candy to several motley groups of trick-or-treaters, I went upstairs and rummaged through the closets until I found a pair of brown woolen slacks from Banana Republic and a body-hugging sweater from DKNY. For my feet, I picked out a pair of mousy brown buff leather shoes I brought back from my recent trip to Italy. That was as pretty as it got for me. Standing in front of the open gate of the cemetery, I could hear the steady, comforting whir of traffic as cars and trucks sped by on Bardstown Road. Every now and then, the distant beam of a flashlight cut through the darkness and illuminated random headstones and crooked monuments at the rear of the graveyard. Evidently, someone was already there, and I hoped it was Mama Wawa and her entourage. I feared it was vandals or rowdy Halloween revelers in search of a paranormal thrill, however. Casting a glance over my shoulder to the lights of Bardstown Road, I entered the cemetery, and my feet crunching as I went, I followed the rutted gravel road that disappeared into the blackness. Remembering the miniature flashlight I had stowed away earlier, I extracted it from my pocket and used the filmy beam to guide my way. Picking out faded inscriptions on mossy, weathered headstones, I slowly made my way back into the depths of the cemetery. Although no specific place to meet had been determined, I assumed we'd stumble across each other sooner or later, and I kept following the gravel way. According to my watch, it was 5 minutes before midnight. 100 yards down the trail, a small limestone structure, Gothic-looking and elegantly eerie, loomed up over the hodgepodge of crowded tombstones. These were tombstones that surrounded the limestone building. In the darkness beyond, the moon slipped from behind a bank of steely gray clouds and shot a tendril of blue light into the blackness. Behind the stone funeral vault, the skeleton of a majestic oak tree caught the momentary light in the silhouette of its branches, and it reached its bony limbs up into the night. Then another bank of clouds drifted across the moon, and shrouded in gloom, it disappeared from sight. Off to the left, a muffled whoop echoed and bushes rattled. I pointed my flashlight in that direction, and I picked my way over broken headstones and bare branches of earth until I arrived at a large structure tucked away in the far corner of the cemetery. The columbarium. I had read about this building in the newspapers. Constructed in the 1950s in a modernist style, it had served as the crematorium until the cemetery board's misdeeds had been brought to light. For the last 2 decades, it had sat vacant and forlorn, a silent victim at the mercy of man and nature, and time had taken its soul. Hooligans had broken out windows and scrawled graffiti over the walls, and litter lay strewn about the entrance. At the front, a massive door with a broken hinge was ajar, held open by a tattered cardboard box holding jumbled files and manila envelopes. As if any of you from Louisville, if you've actually been to the columbarium, if you've been to Eastern Cemetery, chime in and tell people what it looks like. Since then, they kind of cleaned it up and boarded it up, but 20 years ago, it was open. You could still go in there. It was really creepy. So I looked at the time. It was 1 minute before midnight. Well, I guess this is as good a place as any, I thought to myself, and I raised my hand to knock at the door, but I put it back down, struck by the absurdity of knocking on the door to gain admittance to an abandoned building. A split second passed, and the door suddenly pushed out with a scrape. Mama Wawa poked her head out and looked at me. "Ah, there you are, silly man," she fairly cackled with glee. "Right on time you are. We are about to commence." She motioned with her arm that I should enter, so I squeezed through the opening and followed her inside. Hey, Nick, good to see you. And Don from Amici is here tonight. Everyone say hi to him. Okay. So I followed Mama Wawa inside the crematorium. Immediately, I scanned the room for signs of a kidnapped feline. Not that I would have seen any for all the mess and clutter. An overturned desk lay against a far wall, and several cardboard boxes of paper sat near a set of stairs winding down to a lower level. A dirty sleeping bag had been laid out in a corner, and nearby the needles from at least half a dozen hypodermic syringes glimmered in the flickering glow. Flames from a small fire danced in a banged-up soup kettle in the middle of the floor. "Come here, silly man, and join us." Mama Wawa stood at the fire with several other individuals. One of them was Maybelline. She was clad in a black leather unitard and a furry dark cape, and she waved flirtatiously after catching my attention. Are you sure it's a good idea to be here?" I said. My eyes lingered uneasily on a broken urn behind her. A grayish scattering of an unknown material fanned out next to it, and I was afraid I knew the identity of the former contents, if not the former occupants. Nearby were several more needles. Hey, Tim Pardue checked in, and by the way, Tim Pardue is the one who gave me this handy-dandy life supply flask that I use on my outings to Eastern Cemetery. So, they say this place is full of crazy homeless people, I whispered to Mama Wawa. "Tonight it is safe," she said, gesturing in the direction of the door to a tall figure in the shadows that I had walked by without noticing. "Miss Tabitha scared them away, and if they know what's good for them, they won't be coming back tonight." "Oh, Miss Tabitha? The security system?" I let my eyes adjust to the dancing silhouettes on the wall. "You bet. That's me." A tall female form with an upturned pitchfork, stepped forward and emerged from the shadows. Her voice was several octaves lower than mine, and with her chunky high-heeled boots, she was a good 2 heads taller. Jet black hair, maybe it was a wig, I couldn't tell, hung down to her shoulders, and her bangs had apparently suffered a severe workover at the hands of a stylist with a Betty Page fixation. Like Maybelline, she wore a dark unitard and a matching fur cape. She sneered and gave me the once-over before retreating into the shadows. That outfit is so last year. Resisting the urge to comment on her own dubious sense of fashion, I ignored her. She had a pitchfork, after all, and I returned my attention to Mama Wawa and her helpers. Next to Maybelline stood 2 additional drag queens, both of them towering and similarly attired, who puffed on pungent cigars. One of them had a bottle of rum in the other hand, but as far as I could tell, Miss Tabitha was the only one wielding barnyard implements. "This is Miss Claudette," said Mama, pointing to a heavy-set person with a blonde ponytail. The other one, a seemingly anorexic brunette who stared at me with eerily milky blue eyes that I hoped were the result of funky contact lenses, she introduced as Miss Giselle. After leisurely drags on their respective stogies, they both looked at me from over the top to bottom and graciously withheld any comment about my choice of attire for the evening. "Hello," I said. "Nice to meet you." "Likewise, I'm sure," said the blonde ponytail in a husky voice. "Nice to make your acquaintance," responded the skinny one, her voice a nasally warble. The fact that she was a wide-eyed, cigar-smoking, cape-wearing drag queen in a unitard, getting ready to participate in a voodooist ritual in an abandoned crematorium in a haunted cemetery on Halloween Eve hadn't seemed to faze her in the least. Her eyes lowered surreptitiously to study my feet, and then, urges finally getting the best of her, she blurted out her dismay. "Those shoes really aren't right for the season." I looked down at her scuffed dominatrix boots, and I bit my tongue. "Oh, you shush your mouth," said Maybelline, who rushed to my side and draped a sinewy arm over my shoulder. "I think his shoes are cute, so you all just leave him alone." "Silly man, silly shoes, who cares?" Miss Mama nudged Giselle out of the way. "It is the midnight, and we must commence with the obeah." She cozied up to the fire and extracted a small leather satchel from the folds of her skirt, and the others circled in. With one hand, she reached into the pouch, and with a deft flick of the wrist, she cast a pinch of something powdery into the fire. A plume of flame shot up to the ceiling and rained down a shower of tiny copper sparks before disrupting and dissipating to its original size. Giselle lifted the bottle of rum to her lips and sprayed a mouthful of perfectly good alcohol into the fire, which erupted into another column. After wiping her mouth with the back of her hand, she uttered some kind of gibberish that sounded like, "Oma boma, let's go homa." But noticing how the corners of my mouth had started to curl up in a snicker, Giselle pointedly raised her eyebrows at me and directed a glare of aspersion at my feet. Mindful that Mama Wawa not see my gestures, I returned the favor and gave Giselle the stink eye while slowly pointing to her boots. She tried to ignore me and wasted another perfectly good mouthful of rum on the fire, but by the glare of the tiny bonfire, I could see her looking at me out of the corner of her eyes. Mama Wawa spread her hands over the fire and slowly intoned a breathy litany in a language that appeared to be a form of pidgin English, interspersed with patois French-sounding words such as juju, bamboula, and bambouche. Then her body started moving back and forth, left and right, her voice crescendoing in another series of mostly unintelligible words that was repeated by the 3 drag queens in her consort. They in turn started to sway back and forth, then left and right, back and forth. Mama boonga, woonga boonga, they chanted in unison, or something like that. Rocking to and fro, Giselle opened her eyes and scowled at me. I tried to suppress a grin, but failed. The silliness of the whole situation was catching up with me, and I finally gave over to a hearty laugh, and I once again beheld the colossal drag queens mimicking Mama Wawa. Uma goomba, uba boomga, ooga boonga. I joined in, and I found myself swaying back and forth on the balls of my feet in spite of myself. Suddenly, a commotion erupted near the entrance, and all heads turned. The chanting was interrupted. Miss Tabitha fell into a lunging position. The rusty tines of her pitchfork pointed menacingly in the direction of the door. "Who goes there?" she called out in a husky baritone. The soup pot campfire flared up and sent shadows flickering across the walls around us. Mama Wawa raised a vertical finger to her lips, and she used the other hand to motion us away from the door. "What the hell y'all doing in our house?" demanded an angry voice from the other side. "Get on out of here before we cut you." The murmur of an accompanying voice outside hinted at a mob in its fledgling stages. "Your house?" Mama Wawa heatedly jostled her way around Miss Giselle and stormed over to the door. "Who says this is your house?" She pressed a nose up to the crack and peered outside. "This place is abandoned, you dumbass. You get on away from here right now before Miss Tabitha gets after you with her pitchfork." Miss Tabitha squeezed up to the door. "Yeah, you run on home or I'm going to get you." Knuckles turning white, she clutched the farmer's tool to her ample bosom as she called out her warning. "Run on home now." She turned away from the door and grinned excitedly at the rest of us. She was enjoying her confrontation with the rabble on the other side of the door. "This is our house, you dumb bitch," said another voice from outside. "I'm tired and I just want to go to sleep. If you messed up my bedroom, I'm going to cut you good." Nearby, a set of my dusty footprints had been tracked across the rumpled old sleeping bag, which I feared was the bedroom in question. "Y'all get on down to Wayside Christian Mission where y'all belong," said Miss Tabitha in a smoky voice. "Have yourself a donut and some coffee and get one of those nice cots." "We don't want no coffee and donuts, you tranny bitch," yelled a third voice. "Get out of here right now or we're going to cut you." "Yes, get right out this instant," said another voice in impeccable English, "or we will cut you." Miss Tabitha and Miss Wawa looked at me, seemingly for an explanation as to why one of the hobos sounded more educated than the others. I shrugged my shoulders and widened my eyes to signal my shared sense of bafflement. Miss Tabitha leaned an ear up to the door and listened for a second. "Hey, you got an awfully pretty way of talking for being a crack whore. You go to college or something?" "Who are you calling a crack whore?" said the voice fiercely. "I am not a crack whore." "Ha!" One of the other voices started laughing on the other side of the door. "She called you a crack whore." "Yeah, you a crack whore, Whistle Dick." "Shut up," said Whistle Dick. "I'm not a crack whore. You're the crack whore." Several of the other voices whooped and hollered. "Yeah, you a crack whore, Johnny." "I'm not a crack whore," objected Johnny. "You are so," said Whistle Dick. "If you're not a crack whore, then why do you have that nickel bag in your pocket?" "I don't have a nickel bag of nothing in my pocket," he complained. "You're on crack." Before he could continue, a different voice cut in. "You got a nickel bag of crack in your pocket, and you know it. I saw you buy it from Swampy Pete in front of Phoenix Hill Tavern not 15 minutes ago." While the horde outside squabbled over who was a crack whore and who wasn't a crack whore, Mama Wawa turned away from the door and she returned to the small fire, which had started to die out. "Silly crack whores," she sighed, shaking her head. Perhaps we should use this time to make our exit. We cannot complete the ceremony in any case. No obeah tonight. Giselle threw her cigar to the ground and she stomped the life out of it with her heel. Mama Wawa gathered up her belongings and pointed to the steps that wound their way down into the darkness. Let us go this way. Glancing over my shoulder to make sure the door was still closed, I followed the others as they felt their way down the stairs and descended into the darkness. In the dying light of the fire, I caught a glimpse of a disconcerting message scrawled in paint on the wall of the stairwell. You will die. And if Wendy's out there, she's going to say, I will die, I will die. It's an inside joke. Suddenly, a loud scrape reverberated through the concrete structure as the heavy metal door was pushed ajar. At the bottom of the steps, Mama Wawa spun around and I shone the weak beam of the flashlight in her direction as the last of the group got off the steps. There must be a door to the outside around here somewhere, she whispered, pointing at the cluttered space. Look for it. Overhead, the heavy door grated on the cement floor again as the angry horde pushed through. Everyone below froze and listened intently. Eyes turned to the stair as motes of dust swarmed about in the feeble light. Maybelline whispered in a tremulous voice, Do you think they're going to find us down here? Trying to crouch behind me for security, she grabbed my shoulders with shaky hands and hid her head. Don't worry about them coming down here, Tabitha said, dashing to the front of the stair, and she took up her position with the pitchfork. See if you can find a way out of here. An indignant voice echoed from upstairs. Someone's been in my bedroom. It sounded like Whistle Dick. Maybelline dug her fingers into my shoulders as we listened for more. Damn it, those tranny bitches were jumping on my bed. Then it sounded like someone kicked a box across the room. Where'd they go? Asked another voice, perhaps Johnny. Maybe down the stairs. For several seconds, there was silence. And then came the slight shuffle of shoes in the direction of the stairs. Using the flashlight for guidance, I urged the others to follow as I sprinted to the end of a short hall, found a door and pushed it open. On the other side waited the cool night air of the cemetery. We will have to reschedule for another night of obeah in this location. Mama Wawa panted this as we raced to a nearby headstone to gather our thoughts. Silly man, you know where you can find me and Miss Maybelline. Oh, yes, said Maybelline. How's about we do lunch tomorrow? But before I had a chance to come up with a diplomatic turndown, the door to the crematorium burst open with a crash, and out poured the irate mob. Hey, where are those tranny bitches? Said an angry voice. They're going to pay for messing up my bedroom, cried another. Then they spotted us. Time to run, said Tabitha, crouching into position with the pitchfork. Y'all run to the gate, and I'll meet you there. Mama Wawa ran in one direction, followed by the rest of her coterie. I ran the other way. I made it to the Gothic wake house in the distance, and I soon found myself on the rutted gravel road leading to the front gate. But suddenly, a terrifying screech pierced the air, and I was sent tumbling ass over tea kettle into the dew-dampened grass at the base of a decaying old tombstone. So what happened? Hey, Stephanie, what happened? That's the next chapter. So cheers, everyone. I don't know if we have time to read another chapter. What time is it, by the way? Anyone? I could probably read another page or two, but I think that's about it. Yeah. So yeah, if you're just checking in, tell everyone hi, say where you're from. Let us know what you're drinking. And if you haven't already, tell our friend Beth Elizabeth Schott Ross, one of the Thursday Night Dinner Club, happy birthday. We just drank a toast to her out of our gravy boat, the ancient gravy boat of the Thursday Night Dinner Club. Traditionally, it's Jägermeister, but drink whatever okay? It's only 9:35. Okay. I can get another page or two. Yeah. All right. Like I said, I'm trying to milk this. We're almost done. A couple more nights and we'll be done with the book. And what are we going to do after that? So, the next chapter, zombies. So more than a week later, when I picked up my clothes from the dry cleaners at the corner, Dot, the gray-haired woman at the counter, shook her head when I told her about the tumble in the cemetery that had caused all the stains. "Oh, this is the hardest job we've seen in a long time," she said. "Dirt and grass, stains all over the place." She shook her head again and punched some buttons on the cash register. "Girl in the back's not going to be very happy with you. I can tell you that there for sure." "Sorry," I mumbled and shrugged my shoulders. Keeping my eyes averted, I handed over my credit card. Outside, a solid stretch of white clouds seemed to cover the entire morning sky. A fine mist hung in the air, reminding residents that the chill of winter was right around the corner. "And all this because you were hiding out in the cemetery in the middle of the night, getting yourself in trouble again." She clucked her tongue and processed the payment. "You better watch out. Zombies will get you if you're hanging out in the cemeteries all the time." "Well, we've got a lot of weird things in Louisville," I said, "but I don't think we have real-life zombies to worry about." The portly woman stopped and gave me a deadpan look. "Well, I think you might have lots of things to worry about, mister, if you ask me, and zombies would be the least of them. If out of the blue an owl swoops down from a tree and knocks you over like you said it did last night, and then you get your pretty clothes full of stains, you got things to worry about." She shook her head as if I were a lost cause. "I don't want to see stains like this for a long time from you, mister." "Sorry," I said. How was I to know a cemetery owl was going to mistake me for a rabbit or whatever else it was hunting for and knock me over? Dot looked up from the credit card machine and raised her eyebrows. "What were you doing? Hopping around? Eating a carrot?" Realizing I was in a no-win situation, I decided to shut up, and I quit while I was still ahead. I signed the receipt and handed it back to her with a smile. She removed my order from a nearby rack and handed it over. "In the future, please stay away from all wildlife and birds of prey," she said, "and don't go creeping around any more cemeteries or other spooky spots in the middle of the night. Those places tend to have a lot of dirt." "Well, I'll see what I can do," I said, and I left. I had no intention of staying away from the creepy places, but the woman behind the counter didn't need to know that, did she? After dropping off the dry cleaning at home and letting the dogs out, I walked down to the alley with Ormsby Avenue. Before I left, however, I had to give Fritz a bath because I'd come home to find him in the middle of the kitchen after I let the dogs back in, and there he was, sitting in the middle of the floor with a large can on his head. He had rummaged through the garbage and discovered the empty container of Jif I had discarded while testing several recipes for peanut butter cookies earlier that morning. And with Rocky and Bess looking on, he perched on his haunches and licked the interior of the can as it sat on his head. Chuckling to myself about the indignant look on his face when I deprived him of his peanut butter smearings and then had the nerve to shower him down in the kitchen sink, I walked over to Buck's and met my friend Jerry Rogers for lunch. Hey, Sharon and Maria and Gina, good to have you. Located on the ground floor of the old Mayflower Hotel, Buck's was, by most estimations, one of the fancier restaurants in old Louisville. With its Art Deco decor and hallmark mismatched china and silverware, it was a popular spot for the lunch set, especially the ladies who lunch set. When I walked in, Jerry was nursing a cocktail at the bar, which, as usual, was lined with large crystal vases overflowing with an assortment of white blossoms. Clad in a knit sweater and a corduroy blazer, He smiled and waved when he saw me. "Hey, David, how are you?" The hostess showed us to a table in the middle of the room, and after placing our orders, we caught up with each other and our writing projects. Soon, Jerry had finished his hot brown, and I my crispy fish with sweet chili sauce, and we said goodbye until the next time. Out front, I was going to turn and return home when something at the other end of the block caught my eye. From the flouncy skirt and turban, I could tell right away that it was Josephine. To ward off the cold, she had draped a bright red shawl over her shoulders. Quickly making my way to the next street and trying to be inconspicuous, I followed her up to the corner with the witch's tree. Instead of going into the brick apartment building as expected, however, she veered from the walkway and went straight to the gnarled and twisted trunk of the old tree. She dangled a small wicker basket from one hand, and from it she extracted something and appeared to affix it to the tree. Then she skirted around the hedge and jaywalked into the park, the basket swinging jauntily at her side. I strolled nonchalantly past the tree and past the apartment building while trying to keep an eye on Josephine, but before I knew it, she had disappeared beneath the leafy canopy that shaded the park. Glancing back over my shoulder, I could see something hanging from the tree about 5 feet up from the ground. As I approached it, I saw that it was a small doll-like figure and had been tacked to one of the big burls. Upon closer inspection, the body appeared to be made of stuffed fabric, and the head looked like someone had formed it by smoothly wrapping a piece of white cloth around a ping-pong ball or something like that. It had no nose, and the eyes were nothing more than simple X's, and they might have been drawn on by a black magic marker. The mouth seemed to be ink as well, but the person who drew it had evidently put in a considerable amount of effort to make it look like the tight-lipped grimace of someone whose mouth had been shown shut. In addition, 3 stick pins had been sunk into the doll's chest. Well, that's kind of spooky, I thought to myself. I'd seen mysterious amulets and cute little charms left near around the tree before, but nothing quite as creepy as this before, whatever it was. Then I noticed another figure tacked to the bark nearby. This one appeared constructed of sticks wrapped in rough fabric. What was it exactly, though? Another voodoo doll? But there were no pins stuck into its chest, and the arms on this figure had been pulled together and forward so they extended perpendicular from the chest. That was when I realized I was looking at a miniature representation of a zombie. I shook my head back and forth, trying to erase the notion while calibrating my reality gauge. Hobos and gypsies were real people, I told myself. And so were witches, maybe, but only the kind that mixed potions and worshipped the earth, not the kind that flew around on brooms and turned people into toads. Voodoo priestesses were a fact, but zombies, their most legendary creations, I quickly reminded myself they didn't really exist. Studying the figure hanging on the tree, I thought back to the dry cleaners and the cashier's warning about zombies in the cemetery. And I had to wonder if maybe another Voodoo Day wasn't in the making. Afraid that my even contemplating it would make it happen, I pulled myself away from the tree and walked home before running some errands. After stopping at the bank and then picking up a country ham in preparation for Thanksgiving, I had to drop off our Halloween outfits at the costume shop. And as I drove over to Floyd Street, where a large sign read Louise Cecil Costumes hung from a tall pole with flaking white paint, I saw on the sidewalk a tall man ambling with a heavy coat and a knit cap. And from the violin case he carried, I could tell it was Micah. As he strolled out of sight, I parked in an alley off of Floyd Street and walked around the side of a large brick warehouse till I found a small door tucked under a bit of awning. I rang the buzzer on the intercom and walked inside to a cramped sort of foyer with marred quarter-sawn floors. After a bit of searching, I found a small hallway almost hidden behind a low-hanging bend in the narrow stairway that wound overhead. I ducked under and went to the elevator shaft. It was a large freight elevator, and the opening was barred by a door of widely spaced planks. I pressed the up button. From above came a creaking and a shuddering as the elevator made its slow descent to the ground floor. After what seemed like an eternity, the cage rattled to a stop and the plank barrier slid up, revealing a metal floor and a dank interior large enough to accommodate at least a dozen people. At the control panel stood an imposing man who barely nodded his head in acknowledgement as I entered the space, and he stepped to the side so we could pull down the door. After a few buttons were pressed, there came a loud shudder, and the cage lifted and started its tedious ascent to the costume shop. After 10 or 15 creaky seconds, we passed the next floor, an empty expanse whose barren walls and cold floors could be seen through the slats in the elevator door, and then all went dark before we emerged into the light of the third floor, another vacant space with dingy windows lining the back walls. Finally, we reached the top floor, and the door slid up, revealing an explosion of color and noise. Someone dressed as Marie Antoinette strolled by, her wide embroidered skirt brushing my legs in passing. Behind her trailed a bent-over figure with auburn blonde hair, and apparently she was checking the hem of the dress as the other woman walked by. When the stooped lady saw me, she smiled and removed several straight pins from her mouth so she could speak. "Well, hey, honey, how are you?" It was Louise, the owner of the shop, and something of a local icon when it came to costumes. "You can hang your returns right over there," she told me, pointing to a rolling rack already crammed full with dozens of costumes on hangers. "Did you have a good Halloween?" "Yeah, thanks," I said. "Everybody loved our costumes. We even won first place at one of the parties." "I knew you would," said Louise. Nearby, several additional racks seemed to groan under the weight of just as many returned items, and throughout the large rooms that comprised the costume shop, there were dozens more racks and massive piles of clothing and fabric. There were rumored to be over 10,000 costumes in all, many of them hand-stitched by Louise herself, and she kept track of everything with a simple system of receipts and tickets, refusing to use a computer to track her inventory. Shelves along the wall seemed to burst with all types of accessories, including bowlers and top hats over masks, jewel-encrusted crowns, angel wings, and turbans. After attending to Marie Antoinette, Louise breezed by with an armload of flapper dresses and deposited them onto a large velvet armchair next to me. "I heard you're going to help organize the Victorian Ghost Walk as a way of showcasing the haunted stories in the neighborhood," she said, heading over to an enormous mound of costumes by the entryway into the next room. "Well, that's a lovely idea." "Yeah," I said, amazed by how quickly news had spread in the neighborhood. Only the day before had I met with several neighborhood people to discuss ways of capitalizing on old Louisville and its ghostly past. "We'll see if we can pull it off." "Oh, you'll pull it off," she said, "and I'll be happy to help with costumes." "The neighborhood needs something like this, more like this," she said. And she reached into a pile of clothing, and after a bit of rummaging around, she pulled out an enormous witch's hat with a crumpled peak, and she handed it to me. "Here, try this on and see how it fits," she said. "I can get you a black tunic and an overlay, and then you'll be the perfect stick witch next year." I turned the hat over in my hand. "Me as a stick witch?" I moved my head back and forth and chuckled. "I don't think so." "Oh, come on. It'll be a hoot," she said. "People love it when men dress up as witches." She walked over to another enormous pile of objects, and reaching an arm up to her shoulder, she rooted around and then produced a large walking stick with a carved skull on one end. "Here, this will make you even more convincing," she said with a laugh. "A stick witch needs a stick." Although I smiled and accepted the carved walking stick, I didn't really have any intention of using it. Before I had a chance to change the subject to something other than me dressing up as a witch, someone on the other side of the room called out to Louise, and she zoomed over to help him find a Dracula cape and a set of vampire fangs. "See you later," she called out over her shoulder before disappearing into an aisle crammed full of costumes. Stepping aside to let pass a teenager dressed as Little Bo Peep, I made my way back to the freight elevator, and I waited as a silent attendant slowly lowered me and three creepy-looking clowns to the bottom floor. One of them smirked slightly when he noticed me holding a witch's hat and walking stick, and I had to stop and wonder if it wasn't one of the voodoo acolytes from my Halloween night adventure in Eastern Cemetery. Definitely tall enough, I thought to myself. It was too hard to ascertain with all the makeup and clownly accoutrement. Soon the elevator shuddered to a stop, and the attendant rattled up the door, and we all got out. I stowed the hat and the walking stick in the trunk of the car and drove over to Bardstown Road. As I passed the main campus of the University of Louisville and turned onto Eastern Parkway, I noticed another unfortunate semi had gotten itself hung up under the viaduct crossing 3rd Street. A crowd of onlookers watching on as a squad car pulled up and turned on its lights. The driver stood there and scratched his head while studying the mangled mess of a metal wedged up under the overpass. I almost laughed out loud when I spied Micah again, shuffling by on the sidewalk. But then a logo on the side of the truck caught my eye. It was for a costume shop, and although the first part was illegible because of the damage to the side of the trailer, the word zombie was still clearly visible. Next to the logo was a large airbrush figure of a person dressed up as a zombie. With the arms stretched out before him, the man seemed to wander across the side of the trailer in trance. Shaking my head in disbelief, I hit the gas and sped down Eastern Parkway to Bardstown Road, leaving the zombie truck and the crowd of onlookers behind. Given that zombies had already worked their way into my day twice already, I really shouldn't have been surprised to find zombies advertised on the side of a semi hung up under the 3rd Street overpass. But it caught me off guard anyway. The whole time at Louise Cecil's costume shop, I had harbored the sneaking suspicion that I would run across something or someone disguised as a zombie, and when that didn't happen, I somehow, and apparently erroneously, thought I was home free for the rest of the day. By the time I reached the Highlands, fortunately, I had cleared my mind of all thoughts of zombies, and I was looking forward to dinner out with the Tuesday night dinner crowd. The group had decided on Ramsey's, so we went out front and chatted while the hostess prepared our table. We got our usual round table in the front right-hand window and sat down and ordered a couple of bottles of wine and chips with queso. Gina's asking if Micah knows he's in the book. Yes, because the first version of the book, there were some illustrations, and I had someone draw a picture of him from behind, so I asked him if it was okay to include it, and he was, yeah. So Micah knows he's in the book. So when it came time to deciding on our meals, most of us got the same things we always got, and I ordered tortellini graciella. Soon after the crispy fish at Buck's earlier that day, I had begun craving the combination of tricolored pasta with broccoli and mushrooms and cream sauce, and I had to restrain myself from wolfing down the whole bowl when it arrived. After a couple more bottles of wine and lively conversation, the gang disbanded, and I boxed up most of the tortellini to take home, knowing how good it would taste the next day for lunch. Outside, even though darkness had fallen, milky clouds covered the sky, and their pallor cast a good deal of illumination over the busy streetscape. The car was 2 blocks away, and I crossed the street and headed in that direction, but I stopped dead in my tracks when a strange sight unfolded before my eyes. Walking trance-like down the sidewalk from the opposite direction were 3 people with their arms held out stiffly before them. Dragging their feet, they slowly shuffled toward me, and I was able to get a better look at them. Blood seemed to ooze from the corners of their mouths and from a multitude of open sores on their hands and faces. Streaks of black and red-rimmed their eyes, their lifeless eyes, and they were all groaning loudly. Ooh, oh. They were zombies. And that's where we leave off that chapter. So, do the zombies get me? We have to tune in tomorrow night to find out. So, tomorrow night we'll pick up with Francis. That's our next chapter. We'll see what I encountered on Bardstown Road. There's the Tortellini Graciela. Thanks. Moon boots. Yeah, Beth's asking. There was this woman who always, like, I forgot what they called it. We called her moon boots. And then our waiter was Speedy Gonzalez, if you remember that. Yes, Margie Cook, it was the zombie walk. So Margie's ahead of the game. But yeah, tune in tomorrow night and we'll see who the zombies were that I came across on Bardstown Road. So, so it's fun reading all the comments. Like I said, I might not get to you for a day or two, but I go back and I read all the comments. And on average, we're getting 600 or 700 comments every night. So if I can't reply, I'll at least give you a heart or a like. So trust me, I love reading all your comments. If I can, I'll comment as we're reading, but usually I have to go back and go through everything. And just so you know, it's like I spend an hour or two every day just going back and reading the comments. So I love the comments, and I love when people comment back and forth. It's really great. A lot of you are commenting that you're making new friends, and that's really heartwarming because that's what this is all about. We're hanging out together, helping each other. So thanks again for hanging out with me tonight and helping me get through another day. So tomorrow is Monday. It's going to be a good day. So hang in there. Have a beautiful day. Stay healthy and happy. Happy birthday, Beth. Again, by the way, if you're just tuning in, it's Beth's birthday, one of my oldest friends here in Louisville, and we toasted her with a Jägermeister shot out of the gravy boat. And another day, another year older. So I'll see you all tomorrow night, and we'll see what happens next in La Casa Fabulosa. Thanks for all who are tuning in and helping me on Facebook, giving us reviews on our tours, the people who've gone on Amazon.com, TripAdvisor, who helped get the word out about Old Louisville, Sean Stafford and Hunley Media, who've been doing a great job on the website and helping us revamp things. And we're just waiting till things are back to normal and we can get out on the streets and show people around this great neighborhood. So thank you very, very much, and love you all, and we will see you tomorrow. All right? Hey, Susan. Bye, Sue. See you tomorrow. Good night.